Rosenberg Historical Consultants present En route to Old Faithful, the Yellowstone Highway in Converse County, Wyoming. Introduction. When automotive assembly lines began rolling out affordable cars in the early 1900s, Americans were jolted out of their buggies and took to the roads. Exotic places like Yellowstone National Park called to tourists, but a major problem remained: how to get there. Good road clubs sprang up across the nation to encourage the building of user-friendly roads. Some of these early routes, like the Yellowstone Highway, are part of Wyoming's evolving transportation history that began with Indian trails and emigrant roads, the first transcontinental railroad, and later the first transcontinental highway. Today, in spite of continual upgrading and construction, remnants of these early routes can still be found in Wyoming and comprise an important cultural resource. The project. One of the major bridges along the Yellowstone Highway crossed the North Platte River on the west side of Douglas in Converse County. Built in 1923 and enlarged in the 1950s, it was recently determined that the bridge could no longer safely support modern traffic, and plans were drawn up to replace it. In 2006, the Federal Highway Administration, the Wyoming Department of Transportation, and the Wyoming State Historic Preservation Office signed a memorandum of agreement to mitigate the adverse effects to the historic North Platte River Bridge. As a result, Rosenberg Historical Consultants were contracted by WYDOT to map the original route of the 1920s Yellowstone Highway throughout Converse County. Surviving segments constructed before 1928, as well as those of US 87, built between 1928 and the construction of Interstate 25, were to be mapped on USGS quadrangle maps. Such segments of the early Yellowstone Highway that are still part of or adjacent to roads in the current state highway system were to be evaluated as to whether they contributed to the historical significance of the Yellowstone Highway. The project also involved completing Habs Hair documentation of the 1923 North Platte River Bridge for the National Park Service and producing a standard State of Wyoming historical interpretive sign to be located at the site of the bridge. According to the Historic Context and Evaluation of Automobile Roads in Wyoming, written by Dr. Julie Francis, the earliest automobile roads were largely tourist routes from points east to the national parks in the northwestern part of the state, in addition to the first transcontinental automobile road across the southern portion of Wyoming. These were the name highways: the Black and Yellow Road from Minneapolis to Yellowstone Park, the Yellowstone Highway, the Lincoln Highway. They are considered eligible to the National Register of Historic Places. According to Dr. Francis, the period of significance for these roads is approximately 1911 to 1928, when the federal government assumed control over all highway construction. These early roads are considered significant for the role they played in early interstate travel and the development of the tourism industry in Wyoming. They represent the infancy of the automobile era in American history, and they embody a unique period of time in which interstate road construction was predominantly a private venture without institutional support for construction or maintenance. Dr. Francis also poses that intact segments of these early automobile roads are rare, and they bear very little resemblance to the engineered roads of later eras. As the precursors of the modern U.S. and interstate highway system, most of the early automobile roads have been destroyed by subsequent construction, or else they have been upgraded to crowned and ditched gravel roads or paved highways. Where the early roads have been either completely destroyed or upgraded to a modern road, the feeling and association which convey the significance of these roads and the difficulties of early travel have been lost. The current field survey, conducted in 2008, utilized these criteria for evaluating surviving segments of the Yellowstone Highway. In preparation, the consultants inspected original construction plans provided by the Wyoming Department of Transportation. These plans, dating from the 1920s and 1930s, depict the proposed construction as well as the existing road, usually labeled present road on the plans, enabling the consultants to accurately plot the routes onto USGS maps. Other important sources of information included the biennial reports of the Wyoming State Highway Commission, the official route book of the Yellowstone Highway Association in Wyoming and Colorado, dated 1916, Lee Whiteley's Fine History of the Yellowstone Highway, Denver to the Park, Past and Present, and contemporary newspaper accounts. Aerial photographs were also inspected for problematic areas, such as Orin Junction, and to view evidence of the route within private land. The route and possible variations were photographed and described at regular intervals using GPS points.